today we are welcoming one other important CPTM smart partner from Australia again. You did know that about 2 weeks ago or so we had John Blackshaw.
Yes.
And we are very pleased that smart partners have the possibility to kind of add to the signals and to spot continuously take forward from John Blackshaw signals in Australia and Southeast Asia with you.
Yeah.
And John Blackshaw was Keith. He was here and very interested in standards.
Yep.
And in the new technology and crypto assets and blockchain standards. And we followed what you started a year ago with colleagues on the spotted signals real time, but within the realm of standards and a specific example that he's involved in Australia on nanotechnology and another other company is involved. So the discussion with him and his presence at the hub came at a very strategic time when, after the International Standards Organization annual conference, where the message from the group about blockchain and the important role of standards, new important role of standards was made yet again. Now, today, as it happened, again in Asia, in Indonesia, in Bali, the IMF and World Bank have their annual conference 2018. In fact, they start tomorrow. But today, pre-meetings, there were the two Commonwealth finance ministers meetings, as well as the Commonwealth central bank governors meetings, for which again the CPTM group of governors for financial inclusion, they made an intervention on technology and economy. And we are very keen to find out what happened to their meeting today and how the joint statement that took forward, not just replicated only what they discussed in July here at the hub, but took forward the latest developments and those to come. So now you are from Australia and you are involved not only in Australian but in a global dynamics, and particularly in Southeast Asia, and observing the rise of China, as we were discussing before. And the IMF World Bank, they just released their usual annual Global Financial Stability Report. Obviously, there are a number of signals there, not only with Brexit and trade, but there are important messages in relation to the technology, particularly FinTech type of and cybersecurity type of invisible interventions, which may, if they're not carefully nurtured, make or produce a crisis which of a different type than before, but maybe even bigger than before.
Sure.
So that is the significance of the meeting that is taking place now there, and there are signals from there. Australia is leading. We were discussing about really, you could observe that in the last few months is leading developments in blockchain technology, in developing the first standard with they are leading the Technical Committee 307 for blockchain technology. The Commonwealth Bank and the Reserve Bank again are leading, digital technology leading. The OECD Director General of the Finance Group, that they is Australian, and they organized the first policy forum on blockchain technology about a month ago. So Australia is actually the hub or the point of reference in a global context for developments of that nature. interesting that that Nobel Prize this year, a bit earlier than ever, the main thing that we noticed was the economics this Monday, which was very much to do with, again, technology and climate change. It could have been technology and finance or technology and economy, but it's about endogenous growth, economic growth, type of implications, which William Nordhaus, for about 40 years now, and Paul Romer, just left as a chief economist in World Bank or IMF, one of them, but they rightly so were given the Nobel Prize this year for economics because of the climate change again message that is being brought up not only by IPCC but at all levels. So that is a context within which the smart partners and the smart partnership type of interactions, particularly spotting signals and then testing them in real time, we are doing things. Club of Rome is coming next week, and that's why we are meeting again. You're a founder, Club of Rome member, among many others, or veteran, as you
veteran,
said. And but you are so much part of CPTM and the Commonwealth that you are now veteran in CPTM. So
thank you.
Can you tell me, what do you think? What are the latest signals that we can...
Well, one of the pieces of advice that I'm giving my clients in Australia is that when you're looking for signals, we need to keep an eye on China. The worry I've got is that people are very fixated, well, here in the United Kingdom, in the short time I've been back, the debate seems to be solely around Brexit. If you go to the United States, you've got the issues which Donald Trump raises, perhaps with the Middle East politics, etc. But the most profound major change that's going at the moment is the return of China. Some people talk about the rise of China, but it's actually the return of China. If you look back over the last 2,000 years, for 1,500 years of the 2000, India and China have been the two main economic powers. Now, in recent centuries, China fell apart in the warlord era, when you had warlords fighting each other, and of course India was colonized by the British and the French. We see both of those now returning to the status which they used to have. The problem is that I don't think people are thinking through fully the implications for the return of China and India to the world stage. An issue, for example, is in the South Pacific, with the availability of Chinese money, which actually goes in big infrastructure projects. Ironically, when you actually look at the figures, Australia still provides more foreign aid in the South Pacific than any other country.
Right.
But that's done at village level. Whereas the Chinese provide loans for infrastructure projects. So when you step off the plane, you see them rebuilding an airport or something.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, Australia is going into low-level, village-level projects, which probably help the lives of ordinary islanders far more than the big-ticket Chinese projects. But it shows how China is reshaping the global economy. One Belt, One Road, or it's now called the Belt and Road Initiative, means that it's now possible for a train to leave Western China and appear here in the East End of London. So it's one continuous rail connection all the way through. So China is reshaping the global economy.
Yes,
and so a lot is really riding on the continued growth of the Chinese economy. And China is keeping the United States afloat. Very important for Australia. Australia has had the longest continuous period of economic growth in Western history. It's gone on for 27 years. It's interesting to note that they're now questioning how long the American growth cycle will continue, because it's now in its 9th year. And there is a suggestion that the American economy goes into a new recession in the year 2020. One of the replies to that is actually Americans quoting the Australian example, which shows, look at Australia, it's gone on for 27 years of economic growth. We went through the global financial crisis beginning 10 years ago without any problem. We never had a recession. So we haven't had a recession for 27 years. But a lot of that depends on China as our major
Yes,
trading
yes,
partner.
yes.
And so we see therefore that China is a major player in the global economy. The worry that I've got, coming back to the
Just
UK,
yeah.
is that the British spend all their time discussing Europe. There is a world outside of Europe. And similarly, when you go to the United States, they're fixated on their border with Mexico and perhaps some of the challenges dealing with the Middle East. So if you're looking for the importance of spotting signals, keep an eye on China's return to the world stage.
Of course, it's connected to technology, it's connected to climate, it's connected with the way Africa is going to further develop its democracy. Or
Well, the World Bank, exactly, the World Bank report called the New Silk Road talks about the way in which Chinese investment is reshaping the African economies, for good or ill. Whether it's a new form of imperialism, I don't know. But certainly China is now the major player in Africa's destiny. So African countries need to be paying attention to what the Chinese are doing with their money, because quite often they provide loans rather than outright gifts. And if the money can't be repaid, then the Chinese will seek to recover that money via gifts of land from the African authorities.
Yeah, I mean, there is a new resurgence of land reform, attempts for land reform, and obviously those will go ahead. In Namibia yesterday or the other day just finished the second large land conference. But you see, there is this ongoing interdependence of the new technology, the blockchain and the application of them, and land reform, and the Chinese presence or lack of presence, but less and less. There isn't anywhere where there is a lack of presence. So the land reform, for instance, in the last 3-4 years, one of the main applications talked about, it not necessarily yet in place, is the land registration and blockchain technology.
Sure, yeah.
Now, I think China in Africa, with the blockchain type of technology, which they are developing in a very, very big way at a government level, in addition to the private sector, who are probably pseudo-government, but private sector. I can't see how there wouldn't be a combined strategy, including with their own diplomacy and whatever, a combined strategy in relation to this quiet predominance, which is very visible now, of dependence, as the other day was mentioned by the new Prime Minister of Malaysia, dependence, not necessarily colonialism, but total dependence on China.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that is China infrastructure, China digital infrastructure, China roads, China airports, China land, and therefore China products from the land. So this is not an anti-China, it's just a recognition.
Absolutely. Because there are advantages and disadvantages. If you look at what China is doing in terms of alternative energy and healthier cities, clearly world leaders. So at a time when you've got Australia or the United States querying whether or not there is climate change, President Xi has made it quite clear. He says there is climate change, and China is doing its best to try to reduce the risk of climate change. At the same time, the other thing which is interesting about China is that if you're going to produce cryptocurrency, you need to do a lot of data mining, which takes up a lot of energy. China produces a lot of cryptocurrencies because they've got cheap energy. And so you can draw in the electricity to do your data mining. So ultimately, a lot of those coins are going to come out of China.
Which adds to the already imbalance in relation to the financial.
Absolutely, China is a major player in all of that.
So there is quite a visible multiple signal.
Sure. If you're looking for the signals about China, therefore, you've got China as provider of hard money, and also the role that China plays in cryptocurrency as well. And then you've got the Belt and Road Initiative, whereby China is reshaping the global economy with China at the centre.
I suppose what China, does, not necessarily that has an explicit policy about it, is speeding up.
Yeah.
But then by speeding up, the countries in Africa particularly miss the opportunities, because while you evolve and develop, you build up opportunities. But if you speed up in a way internally built up, you're missing a lot of opportunities on the way.
Absolutely, and I would hope that every African country creates a China Research Institute. So in that way they can then have, linked to their own government, a way of monitoring what China is doing and the implications, good or ill, for their own country.
In Australia, probably at least one.
We have them attached to universities. What I'm suggesting is that governments need to have it attached to themselves, so they get the intelligence on what China is doing. And that would be my recommendation for African governments, that they monitor more closely what is going on with China, for good or ill. I'm not anti-Chinese. I broadcast on Chinese television. I broadcast on Phoenix TV. So I'm not being anti-Chinese. I'm just simply saying you've got to pay attention to the impact of China.
This is not an anti-anything.
No, it's just simply saying China is a major force. From Australia's point of view, we are like a child caught between divorcing parents. We're militarily allied to the United States, but our major trading partner is China. We've got to keep those two countries talking to each other.
Very important role for the global context.
Absolutely.
Not just Australia and Asia.
Yeah.
Okay, one other thing, we said we're going to be quite quick. Climate change and technology, and of course signaled by the also Nobel Prize and the IPCC report, and also in IMF and all the rest of it. The Club of Rome next week, trying to find again that miraculous moment which in 1972 articulated for the first time the problem with growth. In fact, is it Romer? Because I was reading this morning. Yeah, Paul Romer says, what's wrong with growth?
Yeah.
But, and then he talks about how technology with particular type of growth, So he calls himself not a complacent optimist, but a conditional optimist about what is likely to happen. What are you? A conditional optimist or a complacent optimist?
Not complacent, ever. So it must be conditional. So my view, therefore, is that growth can be good and it can be bad. And the problem is how we measure growth. So this revolves around gross domestic product. The problem is that the GDP is a reflection of the movement of money through the economy, good or ill. So crime is good for the economy. Pollution is good for the economy. And so really you're just measuring the movement of money. If I employ a housekeeper, I increase Australia's GDP. If I later marry her and stop paying her, I reduce the GDP. So for me, therefore, we've got to look beyond GDP as a standard measure. And we need to find alternative ways of measuring genuine progress.
And as I was mentioning to you before a bit about what Smart Partners did here at the beginning of July, they did approach for the first time this issue of new measures and the nature of the measures required towards GDP based on the impact of data, a new type of data. So it's a new field again.
It's a new field, and the Club of Rome itself issued a report on this some years ago, and I think it's time that we go back to that and just simply saying, look, we've got enhanced methods of accumulating data nowadays because we're able to monitor things so quickly. Why can't we find new ways of trying to define economic progress?
So what do you think, how do you think our Club of Rome 50 years anniversary would kind of take forward?
Well, it's now one of the oldest think tanks dealing with the environment in the world, and it has already produced a number of good reports. So it'll be interesting to see how it can reinvent itself for the next 50 years. It's got a major challenge because all institutions sort of decay over time. So it's got to find a way of renewing itself, and that's what we'll be doing next week in Rome.
That's it. Well, there are many things about crypto.
Yep.
But this one is the Innovative Investor's Guide, is said, to Bitcoin, but is written by a nuclear physicist and somebody who set up a very large cryptocurrency. Chris Bernisac is extremely good. He's one of the best and very comprehensive. And it does not promote one or another. It just promotes understanding. So whenever you want, you can open it whatever page is good. And the other one, which is very recently, and you should probably, maybe, if you wish, try to launch the message about it in your broadcast, is Carl Miller from Demos, a very frequent smart partner, a think tank with us, about the death of gods and the new global power grab. I suppose he's not only talking about things like China or land and so on, he's talking about mainly the impact of digital landscape and a big technological. So with this, probably after the Club of Rome, you pass back and we might be able to make another short.
Good. Thank you.
So for today, thank you very much for this week, and hope to see you at the end of next week.